quiet whispers of opposition. A storm brews. Brace yourselves.
We're going to predicate this organization on class, pride, and poise.
All right, everyone, it's time. And we're live in 3, 2, 1.
The autumn wind is a pirate, blustering in from sea. With a rollicking song, he sweeps along, swaggering boisterously. His face is weather-beaten. He wears a hooded sash, with a silver hat about his head, and a bristling black mustache. He growls as he storms the country, a villain big and bold. And the trees all shake and quiver and quake as he robs them of their gold. The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun.
They'll knock you round and upside down.
And he'll laugh when he's conquered and won.
Raider Nation, stand up.
Welcome in, everyone. JT along with Eddie Paskal. We're at Raiders headquarters for the 2024 Raiders schedule release. It's an honor to be here. Eddie, one of my favorite days, nights of the year, and we get to tell the news to the Raider Nation as the schedule is up and it's go time. The season doesn't start now, but it does for a lot of Raider fans.
Well, it feels like it starts right now, doesn't it? And JT, before we get rocking on diving through these 18 weeks here, big shout out to our entire Silver and Black Productions family. We started here. You guys saw the schedule release video. Countless hours for countless people to get that thing off the ground. Looks awesome. It gives me chills watching it. So big shout out to all our friends here in Silver and Black Productions and a lot of friendly faces in that video too.
We knew a lot of people
yes,
there.
Sir.
It was a lot of fun there, and good to see Coach Pierce at the end there.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to jump in. We're going to go through the schedule week by week, and then we're going to get a lot of reaction on all platforms after that. So as you're watching on YouTube, if you want to react amongst yourselves, we're going to have a lot of fun here over the next couple of days looking at it. Eddie, I always said that this is an important day, night. This is where you get the credit card out. I've always said get the airline ticket in the room first. The tickets will come next. You'll get the tickets. But start planning as you look there at what games you like, when it fits your budget and schedule. And I have a feeling a lot of Raider fans are going to be on the phone tonight to airlines and hotel rooms around the country.
I mean, as they should. And JT, we've seen the past couple seasons at Allegiant Stadium what an incredible experience it is to go to a Raider game, right? You get the obviously the 60 minutes on the field, but there's so much more that goes into it. The entertainment, the kind of mystique that you feel in that stadium. So yes, all our Raiders fans, we love you here in Vegas, but if you're coming to visit us from out of town, make sure you book your flights like JT said. Get it all handled now because those prices are only going this way.
Yeah, and we're going to start off with the schedule, and there's a couple of surprises.
Yeah.
Every year when the schedules come out, I was taught to look at a couple of things. Where's the bye week? We'll get to that. Where are the cold weather games? Where are the back-to-back games on the road? Where do we start? Where do we finish? And right out of the gate, there's a bit of a surprise for me because the Raiders started on the road last year with 2. We open up in L.A. against the Chargers. So we open up with Jim Harbaugh here as the Chargers are ready to roll. And I want to just say this from being in the building here. Antonio Pierce is going to have that city drummed up. I'm saying this now on behalf of Raider Nation. Raider Nation, get your tickets. You don't have to worry about your hotel rooms there. You'll be coming from home, and let's get on that game. Eddie, I am a bit surprised we open up at L.A. against the Chargers.
Yeah, a little bit. You look at last year opening against a division rival. Last year was the Broncos. This year is the Chargers. But to your point about Antonio Pierce, right? You can't tell me that there's not going to be a ton of emotions flowing through him week one, right? Week 1, first official game in the big chair, a homecoming. Like, there is so much that is going to go into this game. The energy, enthusiasm, playing against a Jim Harbaugh coach team, there's a new look Chargers, like you mentioned. For me, you always like to start at home, but this is a great place, in my opinion, to start off the 2024 campaign.
Well, Jim Harbaugh started under Al Davis for his first job in the NFL. He's a hell of a coach. You're not going to hear me say anything about him being a coach, but he hasn't coached in the NFL in a long time. Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler, all gone. Depending on what you graded them in the draft, I think it's good to catch them there. It's a Raider vibe of a home game. There'll be more Raider fans there than Charger fans. That's fact, not fiction. Raider fans will take over that parking lot and try to take over the game. It's a worthy opponent. Eddie, it seems like we split with them every year.
They
get us there and we get them here. Last time we played, 0-0. We put up 63 on them. 63. So to play them again, Tom Telesco, maybe call it the Telesco Bowl. What's going to happen here? I like it. It's good. It's close to home. After breaking camp, we'll get to Costa Mesa down the road, but to have short travel to come in there on fire off the preseason.
Yeah, and we'll get to this later in the show, JT, but I do love how the schedule works out in the early goings travel-wise, right? And it's an important thing when you're on a West Coast team or West Coast-ish like we are here in Las Vegas. But look, like we talked about, it's going to be a high-energy game, a new-look Chargers team. And like to your point, Harbaugh, incredible coach, right? Neither of us are going to dispute that. You look at the numbers. But the fact that this is going to be game one for him, we talk about it all the time, especially with a new staff, right? There's so many items, so many little things that go into a game day that they're not going to have a chance to fully script that out, right? Yes, you do have the benefit of the preseason, but I love getting the Chargers week 1 to start the season.
Hey, Brock Bowers' first game.
That's right.
He's in Los Angeles.
Yeah, not too
in front of
bad.
the Raider Nation. That's a big game, and I think this is when I mentioned Tom Telesco, for Antonio Pierce, the Compton connection, the L.A. connection, the Inglewood connection as not the interim coach who hasn't coached there as a head coach. This is his first time coaching the Las Vegas Raiders in Los Angeles, going back to where he's from. He will have the place, the entire area of Southern California ready for this.
And real quick, JT, just talking about AP, one of the things that you and I have talked about, and we've heard it and we've seen it, we've experienced, Antonio Pierce, a guy that has a great respect, a great appreciation for the history of this organization. So going back to Los Angeles, just another element that I'm sure AP is going to be fired up about, is going to have those guys ready to go. And look, if there's one thing that we know about Antonio Pierce, the man is a master motivator. So you cannot tell me week 1, we've been waiting for 7 months, however long it's been, to play meaningful football. All 53 guys on that roster, everyone who's up on game day is going to be ready to rock in Los Angeles.
Well, maybe shocking to the Raider Nation is week 2 on the road again. All right, let's pump the brakes for a second. On the road, the first 2 games, cross country to Baltimore to take on the Ravens. The Ravens lost to Kansas City on the road to the Super Bowl. Lamar Jackson, the MVP type player, what he can do. I'm surprised by this. I'm not concerned about the opponent, but that is coming home and then flying cross country. Now, here's the good news. Not a cold weather game.
Bingo.
Not a cold weather game, but what we looked at and we talked about in the pre-show meeting is Baltimore opens up at Kansas City. They'll have 9 days off before this game. Good or bad. If they win at Kansas City, which a lot of Raider fans hope they do, so Kansas City would go 0-1. They'll have 9 days off, and they'll be sitting, waiting, rested up for their home opener against the Silver and Black.
Yeah, and one thing that's interesting too is the benefit of starting the season back-to-back road. You're going to get some of those some of those home games back on the back end, which we'll get to later on in the show. But yeah, I mean, look, you can't. There's no way to cut it. Like the Baltimore Ravens, a good football team,
absolutely.
A hard-nosed smash mouth, kind of similar to what the Raiders are attempting to build here in Las Vegas. But look, traveling east, never easy to do. We're looking at our first 10 a.m. kickoff of the year here on CBS against the Ravens. So it'll be a good test, I think, a good measuring stick game to see where the Raiders are, to see a team kind of built in their image and likeness, and candidly see how they score up early in the season.
It's a big game for a lot of reasons. The travel's the big thing. And how about the fact that we get both Harbaugh brothers on the road? Who was in the back office on Park Avenue that said, let's give the Raiders both Harbaughs? You don't think John's going to be picking up the phone from Jim right after the game? What'd you see from the Raiders? What are some of their tendencies? So I'm not saying this is easy. I'm not saying it's brutal. but very interesting. Ideally, I don't like the Raiders opening up with 2 on the road, but with stadium conflicts, whatever happens along the way, this is the hand that the Raider Nation has been dealt. There's a lot of Raider fans back east, and there aren't a lot of back east games. You know, the Buffalo, New York Giants and all that. A lot of the Jersey fans, the Raider fans in and around Baltimore, the ones coming up, that could be your East Coast early road game and show up big.
You know, we talk about, you say, I don't love the fact that the Raiders open back-to-back road games. Well, we talked about AP being a master motivator, right? He's going to say, hey, look at our schedule, right? League didn't do us any favors in this regard. These guys are going to be ready to rock, 100%, 1,000%. But again, I think for me, when I look at this game, JT, yes, to your point, you catch the Ravens in Baltimore early. You're not going to have to worry about snow, sleet, rain, any of that stuff. You're going to have a chance to go to Baltimore. The weather, fingers crossed, will be good. And in terms of an X's and O's matchup, it's going to be a really, really intriguing game to see. Now with how the Baltimore wants to do things, what the Raiders are doing with this incredible defense that Patrick Graham and company are building, it's going to be a fun one.
I'd rather play at Baltimore than in November,
1,000%.
December. 1,000% there. All right, the home opener. Let's
Yes,
get to
sir.
week 3. It'll be Carolina. And look, I look at a home opener a couple of different ways. We beat the Ravens in a home opener, which was big. COVID, Drew Brees, there was no one there. We were there. There was no one there. Home openers have been pretty big in Vegas. They have been. We've had big home openers. Carolina's coming in. They've been bothered by a bad record for a while. They made the Bryce Young move. They're trying to build and find an image there. And the Raiders open up at home. There'll be a heavy Raider fan base for this one. As you think, Carolina, I'm sure, is going to want to come out, some of their fans, and see the building here. But the home opener, Carolina, look, I'm not here to say must win. We're not going to do any analysis on the games and break down the players here, but that's an important game. After 2 on the road, Raider Nation will be waiting for the Raiders to open up Allegiant Stadium.
And I think most importantly, JT, it's going to feel like a home opener, right? The fact that you have to wait, like to your point, that the fans are going to have to wait a few weeks to see Allegiant Stadium, a beautiful building ready to go. It is going to feel like a home opener. I know our game entertainment folks are going to have that place rocking. And so, I mean, an interesting opponent, right? Kind of opening the slate against the Carolina Panthers team that candidly has had their struggles the past couple seasons. But the energy, the atmosphere is going to be awesome, and one I'm really looking forward to seeing.
One of the biggest games of the year will be Cleveland. Cleveland travels well. They're a good franchise, from Jim Brown to Paul Brown to the Dog Pound. Get ready. They're coming to Vegas. Hold your tickets. Hold strong. Hold the wall. The Brownies will want to come here. That's a good game. I mean, that's one of the best defenses in football, led by Myles Garrett. You got Mad Max Crosby. That'll be the hype for that game. It's going to be Myles Garrett versus Mad Max Crosby, even though they don't get to play each other. We don't know what to expect from Deshaun Watson. Very good athlete, one of the best athletes in the year. Is this his breakout season coming back after all the times he's missed? So the Raiders will go on the road for 2, and then they'll come back for 2, Carolina and Cleveland. And I'm telling you, that place is going to be rabid and wild as the Browns travel well.
You know what I love about this game, GT, is it's going to feel like an old school, nasty Raiders football game, right? You talked about the Browns defense. Statistically speaking, the number 1 defense a year ago in the NFL. A Raiders defense now that we have in Las Vegas, a defense that we can feel really proud, really excited about for the first time in a long while. Our expectation is they're going to be bigger, badder, stronger than they were even a year ago. So it's going to have that feel of, it feels like one of those games that should have been played in the rain and the muck and the mire, you know what I mean? But all the same, back at Allegiant Stadium, it's going to be an awesome experience, a game day that will be, to your point, a lot of fans there in the house, and it'll be a very, very interesting game, an AP type of game, JT.
Absolutely. Remember, their record last year was 11-6. Carolina had 2 wins. We go from a 2-win team to an 11-win team. And that's a good team there. I'm excited for this. I got a lot of friends from Cleveland over the years. That's Raider country, too. There's been some historic games in Raider history going through Cleveland. So I'm excited for that. That'll be a big home game. That's going to have a feel. You made a great point. That is going to be maybe the toughest football game of the year, because Antonio Pierce is a defensive head coach. The addition of Christian Wilkins, what the team is doing, Spillane, the new players we brought in, that is going to be probably a lower scoring game, smash mouth, a turnover, a strip sack will decide that game. And it's a good opponent. It's an opponent that was better than the Raiders last year.
Well, we talked about, JT, we were talking about the Ravens a minute ago, and a team that feels very similar to what the Raiders are trying to build. Same goes for the Cleveland Browns, right? A defensive, stalwart team, a team that wants to play nasty football, control the line of scrimmage. Some of you have heard that before. That's what Antonio Pierce wants wants to do. So this is going to be two teams that come in with similar styles that want to be effective in the same manner. And candidly, the best 11 out there, that's who's going to win the game.
And we have a division game again on the road. If you look at the schedule that we have posted up here, we don't have a division game at home yet, and we'll have 2 on the road. Very important here. Opened up last year. Jimmy Garoppolo at the time went into Denver and won. That was a big victory to get the Raiders off to a good start. We'll go to Denver, week 5 there. Sean Payton. Could it be Bo Nix, Zach Wilson? They're working on the quarterback. Look, I don't think they're a rebuild, but they're changing up that franchise a lot. They've made some aggressive moves over there in Denver. And I know for Raider Nation, if you're trying to add up the wins on the left and go, which games are we going to win? That's a game you got to win. You got to go in there and get that win. We've beaten Denver 8 in a row. And once you start getting to 6 in a row, 8 in a row, it's hard to get to 9, 10, 12 in a row. So eventually that streak's going to come to an end. It can't come to an end this year. We got to go get Denver in Denver.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that to me, JT, you look at the Broncos, and I agree with you 100%. We talked about this last year, right? A talented team in Denver. They just couldn't figure out the quarterback situation for the Broncos a year ago. Do they have it figured out now with Bo Nix? That remains to be seen. But all the same, like until the Broncos are able to prove that they're able to beat the Raiders, you have to feel good about the silver and black chances, even going onto the road. Like you mentioned a year ago, Jimmy Garoppolo, the quarterback at the time, goes in there, handles business against the division rival. And look, as we go through the schedule in totality and then kind of zoom out and look at it, it's hard. It's so hard to overstate how important these division games are, how vital they are, especially everyone in this division chasing the Kansas City Chiefs. You have got to pick up division games regardless of who the opponent is. And as we look at this one here, week 5, which will be October 6th, this is one that you feel like, okay, you got it. If you're the Raiders and you're the type of football team that you want to be, you got to come away with a W.
Look, they're starting off with 2 on the road, and they don't give us a division home game out of the gate. Okay, so let's tip this in reality. If you look at this and say to yourself and scratch your head, wait, we don't get a division game at home until a little bit. We'll get to that in a second. We got 2 division games on the road. We open up with 2 on the road in the AFC. I mean, it's roll time. It's go time right out of the gate, and I'm going to be talking a lot about that on my platforms along with you this year, that this team's got to be ready to hit the ground. Every NFL team's got to be ready coming out of camp, but we'll put a premium on the start of this season.
But if you look at this, JT, right, and yes, the reality of the Raiders having to wait a minute to host a division game is very real. But all the same, if we wake up on October 7th, right, and the Raiders have played 2 division games on the road and they're 2-0 in the division, now all of a sudden you're like, okay, now we're cooking with gas. Now we're in business. Now we're kind of in that carpool lane. We're controlling our own destiny. A lot of football to be played in between now and week 5, but all the same, it lines up in a certain type of way for the silver and black.
Eddie, you've done this before. You got to stack some wins early. For every game to mean something later, you got to get wins early. So now we go to a very interesting game. The Steelers have been here, the terrible towel. We see him now, and it's Russell Wilson, who is the quarterback of that team. And I still think he'll remain the quarterback by the time he gets here, unless something crazy happens. And I don't think Justin Fields is going to come in there and be the starter for this game, but that's a big game. And as I'm waiting, and we're going to get to primetime games or not, I thought this would have been a really good shot to throw this on primetime. Steelers deliver. The Raiders and the Steelers have a tremendous history on Monday Night Football, right? A tremendous history in this league. And this game here, as we take a look at it, this is an important game because the Steelers coming in, we got to catch the Steelers here Sunday, October 13th. This is a 105 game. And how about Mike Tomlin again? Last year they were 10-7. They weren't a great team, but they found a way down the stretch to get to double-digit wins.
Yeah, I mean they're a team, and JT, we talk about this year after year after year for nearly 2 decades now. Tomlin teams just find a way to win football games, and it's not pretty, it's not sexy. Oftentimes you're going to leave the game scratching. How did they figure out a way to pull this game out? And if the Raiders want to be that type of team that can impart their will on people, that can say, hey, we are here. We're not going to be here for a year. We're going to be here for 4 years, 5 years. These are the games, JT, at home in front of your crowd that you got to find a way to handle.
Absolutely. The Steelers have always been a tough team for the Raiders. They have been. The Raiders have been tough on them. It's one of the best rivalries in all of football. It has been since the 70s, even before that, and I know Raider Nation will be fired up. We know Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's been here a number of times. They've been here. They know this trip. Maybe they have a little fatigue because they've been out here a bunch. Hey, I've seen it before. Yeah. I don't know. We'll wait till that game
And
comes.
Completely unrelated to anything, one of my favorite uniform matchups that we see is Raiders and Steelers, because one of my favorite things, and I've talked about this a bunch, is one of my favorite things about working here is you go back and you look at photos of Raiders from the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s. They all look the same. The uniforms don't change, and same with the Steelers, right? So when you go pull up, pictures of the Raiders playing the Steelers in 1979, the uniform matchup holds up, and it's one of my favorite things to see.
Absolutely.
Aesthetically, it's fantastic.
Week 7 on the road, short trip to Los Angeles to take on the Rams. Another important game, another fan base. Rams got good fans. Raider fans will take over that building. The Raider fans will buy every single ticket that's available for that game. It's an Antonio Pierce game again, being from out there. And the Rams last year finished 9-8. Sean McVay, they're the head coach. And what's going to happen here? This is a team last year. Offense ranked 7th in yards per game and 8th in points per game. Pretty good offense. Matthew Stafford had a really good year last year. So the secondary for the Raiders will be tested. But I looked at this when I saw the schedule today, and I said, Chargers is our L.A. game and the Rams, and we get both the L.A. games out of the way, week 1 and 7. I would have liked it to spread out a little bit more. I always like going to L.A. Later in the year, but I like this game, the SoFi Stadium. We got to start making that a real home field advantage and a little payback for some of the losses we've had there. So week 7, Raiders travel on the road. Another short trip as they take on the Rams.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about this a little bit too, JT. But to me, this is where we kind of start the meat of this schedule, right? We look at week 7 to week 11, and I know we'll get there in a second. But to me, this is go time for the Raiders, right? You look at the way the schedule lines up. You look at some of the opponents the Silver and Black are going to take on. Look, you and I are not here to sit and count wins and figure out what has to happen for the Raiders to make the postseason. But I will say this. This feels from 7 to 11, the point of the season that we're at with a bye week in the middle, this is go time for your 2024 Las Vegas
Absolutely.
Raiders.
Biggest game of the year at home will remain the biggest game at home in Vegas Raider history. The biggest game at home is Kansas City, period. There's no way to sugarcoat it or spin it. They're the Super Bowl champs, and they're going for a three-peat. I think if they get the three-peat, which I hope they don't, they'll be considered the greatest team of all time. Better than the 72 Dolphins, better than anybody. This is a must-win, show-up game here. This is the game that you circle as the most important game, period. You get the world champs at home. Act like it at home. Get ready to roll. Kansas City is coming to town. This is a big one, and we got to wait a while. It's not till week 8.
And an interesting nugget, too, JT, the Chiefs, we talk about it every year where it feels like, oh, my gosh, every time we play the Chiefs, they're coming off of a bye week. They've had two weeks to get ready. This year, they're playing the Niners the week before they come to Allegiant Stadium. A tough game, a rematch of epic proportions between those two teams. So do they I don't want to say look past the Niners to look ahead to us, but all the same, the Chiefs coming in off a really, really tough game. The Raiders coming home after a tough match against the Rams. So this is, to your point, an intriguing one. And if you're a Raider fan, this is the one you have circled on the calendar.
It's the biggest game of the year. It will remain that until the Raiders start beating Kansas City and flip the rivalry. I'm looking forward to that one, and we know Kansas City, the last time they played in Allegiant Stadium, they won the Super Bowl. What else you need to hear? Big game. Let's go get that one. Week 9 at the Bengals. So I paused when we saw this, when we saw the schedule earlier, and we knew the bye week we'll get to after that. I like this game here, too, but it's coming off Kansas City, and then you go to Cincinnati in a non-cold weather game. Very important. This is not a 4 below game. Hopefully no snow. Obviously the weather's going to be fine there. And we look at this team here. They're very good, but Joe Burrow hasn't been healthy in quite some time. So the Bengal game, as we look at this November 3rd, 10 a.m. on Fox, that's another early start, an early start back east.
Yeah, and I think most importantly for this one, JT, is the fact that it is in early November, not mid to late December. And look, the weather guys are going to do what the weather guys are going to do. But if you're playing the statistics, you're playing the odds, the weather should line up for the Silver and Black in this one because really, look, I love a weather game as much as the next guy, but you want to make sure that this team is operating in optimal circumstances. Obviously, you're not going to have that in any type of outdoor game, but like I said, I would much rather play this game in early November than late December.
And let's pump the brakes on Cincinnati for a second. They were ranked, they were 31st in defense in yards per game, and they were only 22nd in offense. We're not talking about Kansas City here. This is a team that's lost players. They've lost players the last couple of years. The Raiders, I think, have gained better players. A big point of emphasis for me. The Raider roster got better over the last year or two, led by Christian Wilkins, some of the moves, Brock Bowers. They've had a good draft too, but I think Cincinnati's roster is not much better than the Raiders. Now, their quarterback is really special if he's healthy and he's clicking and having an MVP-type year. But Week 9 after the Bengals, none of them are easy. That's going to be one of the harder ones.
Yeah, agreed. And I think when we just look at the reality of the schedule, JT, going Week 9, like the Bengals are going to know kind of who they are at that point, right? This isn't like, to your point, they're trying to figure it out week 2, week 3. Like, they're going to know who they are in early November. So it's hard to go east. It's hard to play in that 10 a.m. window. We see the numbers year after year after year. But this is going to be, another one of those measuring stick type games for the Silver and Black.
I love the bye week.
Me too.
I always don't complain, Eddie. I complain a lot, but I always don't. I have no complaints. We can move on. I love the bye week here. Week 10 bye week is where it should be. Last week, week 13.
Oh my! It was in mid-December.
There was no bye week last year.
Yeah.
There was no bye week last year. The season was kind of where it was at that point, coaching change and all that. The bye week did nothing for the Raiders last year, I think, as the season, we're out of the playoff hunt, or we're going to have to fight and really run the table there late. No problem with the bye week there, but the bye week comes off of Cincinnati and big travel to Miami as we roll into Miami. So look at the calendar here where we get the bye week. We're going to come back on an airplane from Cincinnati, get to Vegas, then have a bye week, and then the players are going to get back here instead of playing at home. Because I'm a big believer in the bye week. If you have a home game after your bye week, you're home right up into the game. You're sleeping in your own bed before the night before. Now the Raiders got to get on a plane and go on a long flight to Miami. That will test them to wake up and get going and get ready for the Dolphins.
Similar to you, JT, like I can find things to complain about in the schedule. The location of the bye week is not going to be one that I complain about in 2024. Yeah. I think perfectly timed for the Raiders. Hopefully playing meaningful football at that point is going to be a great point. And we look at, the back-to-back travel weeks for the Raiders. Obviously the week in between with the bye. But I think one of the benefits of where the bye week is and how that the schedule lines out is that the Raiders are going to have a 10 a.m. kickoff against the Bengals, bye, and then another 10 a.m. kickoff. So really, it's going to be rinse and repeat in terms of the travel, in terms of the preparation, in terms of the plan, right? It isn't going to like you're home for a 105, and now you're readjusting your body to go play for a 10 a.m. kickoff. So I love the bye. I think it's at a great point, and this Dolphins game is not going to be an easy one, though.
Now, I want to stop for a second before we go on, because you had a really good point as we prep for the show. You thought this week 7 to 11 was very critical. Jump in on what you meant by that.
Yeah, I mean, let's just look at it realistically, JT. Like, you're going again from 7 to 11, right? You're playing 3 really good football teams. You're going Rams on the road, Chiefs at home, Bengals on the road. 3 really good football teams. Then you get a chance to come home, lick your wounds, get healthier, as healthy as you can be in early November. And then you're back on the road, a long trip to play the Miami Dolphins, another really good football team. This is where you got to pick up some wins, right? Because in the world of worst case scenario, this is where your season can kind of flip, right? This is where your season can change in a negative aspect. But hypothetically, living in the world of fun, if the Raiders go 3-1 over that stretch, okay, now it's go time, right? Because now it's go time. You handle business, and now you have the Broncos the week 12, and then on the road for that big game against the Kansas City Chiefs. I just feel like, JT, 7 to 11 is the meat of this schedule, and if the Raiders want to make any type of noise towards the last third of the season, that is the chunk where they got to go, and they got to go to work.
I agree with you, and we're going to review and give our analysis after all the calendar and the schedules here wrapping up here in a bit. But you're right about that. Week 7 to 11 is make or break.
Yep.
You know exactly who your team is by then. You don't know who your team is week 1.
No.
You don't know. You know who your team is coming after the bye week. All right, let's move on to the Broncos game again. And the Broncos come in. This is week 12. Denver Broncos, that's Sunday, November 24th, here around Thanksgiving, 105. Broncos are coming off an 8-9 record. Remember, they got hot down the stretch last year. We got them in the beginning and end of the year last year and got them in that game. And again, the Broncos, we're going to play both of the Bronco games because the Bronco game week 5 and week 12, I need 2 wins there.
Yeah.
That's it. If you're talking about winning 10 games, 11 making the playoffs, 9, 10, 11, you need 10 pretty much to make the playoffs. You better check the Bronco games if you're a diehard Raider fan in the Carolina game and go, you get Carolina and you get the Rams who are good, but then you get Denver twice. So I like Denver being finished by week 12. And this could be a year that Sean Payton turns it around. All due respect, but I love where we get the Broncos. I didn't want week 1 and week 18 again. And we'll get that coming up here, but got to take care of Denver. Have to.
And again, JT, right, no disrespect to anyone in that building, but until the Broncos are able to prove that they can beat the Raiders, you have to feel good about the Raiders' chance. It's been 4 years, JT.
Yep.
It's been a presidential term. It's been 4 years since the Broncos were able to beat the Raiders. So to your point, yes, I do love the way that it lines up in terms of being done with the Broncos in, late November? But all the same, right? You know, you and I have done this long enough, and we've learned enough that you can't put the W's next to anyone, right? Without going out and there playing the games. But Antonio Pierce going to have this team ready to go. And to your point, the identity of the Raiders is going to be set by week 12. We're going to know who the Raiders are, right? We're going to know what they're about. And I think one of the best parts about Antonio Pierce taking the helm here is as we sit here on May 15th, we know what the Raiders are about. We know their identity. We know what they want to do. Now it's a matter of fact going out there, playing the games, and showing and manifesting that identity that Antonio Pierce has talked about since he took this job.
My son always says positive. You got to be positive about manifest. Positive win.
W's, baby, W's.
I just manifested 2 against the Broncos.
There it is.
Right the last 4 years. Let's hope I can do it again. Okay. Here we go. Black Friday.
Silver and Black Friday, JT.
Silver and Black Friday, and I was talking to our good mutual friend Q Myers.
Yes.
And he made a good point. Why don't we get Black Friday at Allegiant Stadium? They 2 years in a row, they didn't give us Black Friday, Silver and Black at Allegiant. And now we go to Kansas City to play this game here, and this is the big one. Went to Kansas City last year. It was their last loss they had before they ran the table for the Super Bowl. This is Friday, November 29th. That'll be 12 noon Pacific time.
Unique kickoff time.
Amazon game.
Yep.
Amazon game. So the Black Friday game here, and the Raider home game against Kansas City is your biggest one. This has got to be your second one.
Yeah, 100%, right? And we talk about like the kind of narrative surrounding the Broncos taking on the Broncos taking on the Raiders. Well, the Raiders now have an opportunity to kind of change the narrative surrounding the Kansas City Chiefs. Yes, they were able to get that one on the road last year, but I think the next kind of level of maturation for this team is being able to do that consistently. Is being able to go into Kansas City. And look, Kansas City, one of the loudest, most difficult places to play in the NFL. They do an incredible job of getting those fans rocking and rolling. But if the Raiders can go in there, play the type of football that Antonio Pierce wants them to play, bully the Chiefs at the line of scrimmage. I mean, this is, everyone watching at home after a beautiful Thanksgiving meal, man, this is what it's all about on Black Friday.
And this is a game they're going to want because they were embarrassed last time. Raiders scored 2 defensive touchdowns in a combination of 6 seconds, and they had their big moment. That was the big moment for the Raiders, is beating Kansas City, the 63, the Silver and Black put up the Chargers. That's where it started. That's how Antonio Pierce retained his position and went from interim head coach to head coach. That was a pivotal game for him to become the head coach, so everybody's fired up. I can't wait for that game. I like it that time of year, coming off Thanksgiving, Black Friday, and look, a lot of fans are going to be watching that, streaming that on Amazon. We'll get it here in the home market. Then, after a road game, you come back, Eddie, week 14 at Tampa Bay. Now, this is a road trip. I like road trips.
Yeah.
I like, they let me here go on a couple of games a year, host the pregame from the booth. I like going to Tampa. I like Tampa a lot. It's a good place to go, good football market there, and that's a fun trip. And I want to make sure we weave this in to our broadcast. This is about you, the fans of the Raider Nation. Where are you traveling to? Well, this is one that jumps out at me. That's a good road trip for Raider Nation. A lot of Raider fans in Florida. It can get up there from South Georgia, can drive down there. I like this game. It'll be Baker Mayfield. Remember Baker Mayfield with the Rams?
Hard to
going
forget.
the length of the field.
Yep.
And as I look back at them last year, the Bucs were 9-8, and the Bucs had a big finish, and Baker Mayfield played well down the stretch. So I'm looking at that game. That's one of the games I have circled because I think no matter what the Raiders' record is, here comes the push. Start winning. You got to be able to think you can go into Tampa and beat Tampa.
Yeah.
Kansas City, Baltimore, very good teams, and Raider fans will be ready for that. But you got to look at Tampa Bay and say, we can beat Tampa on the road. We're going to go get that game.
Well, the way that I look at this Tampa game, GT, is obviously the funkiness of this 17-game schedule.
Yeah.
Now, we can't break it out into quarters as evenly as we once could. But really, for me, this starts the home stretch, like you said.
is.
This starts those final 5 where you got 3 at home. And really, after the Tampa game, you only have 1 more road game. So to me, this is go time. We talked about how important that week, that stretch is from week 7 to 11, how that's really the meat of this schedule, how this is where we're going to find our 2024 Raiders. We're going to see what they're about. Well, if they are what we hope they are about, now it's really go time. Now let's put your foot on the gas. Let's finish strong. Let's see what we can do over the final month of the season. And it has has to begin in Tampa Bay.
Absolutely. I love this game. Baker Mayfield versus which quarterback? Will it be Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew? We got a lot of content we got to fill throughout the summer, and we'll figure that out there. So that's a fun game. And then Week 15, Atlanta. Atlanta at home. This is Monday Night Football.
Play the Monday Night Football song.
And let me tell you another thing. I'm not going to get too dramatic here. I'm furious. I'm furious that the Raiders don't have a Sunday night primetime game and they have one Monday Night Football game, and you bury it. You bury it there. You bury that Monday Night Football game at the end of the year like that for the great fans of the Raider Nation. I don't like that. This wasn't going to be sugar-coated. There were things I don't like about this. This is what I don't like. I don't like a Monday Night Football game Week 15. I think that's a slap in the face to the schedule makers and the organization. You don't give the Raiders, the kings of Monday Night Football for decades, you don't give them Monday Night Football in Vegas where everyone wants to come for a 3-day weekend, and you make them wait till December 16th to do this. I'm kind of furious about that. I think they'll win the game. I think the Raiders will be good. Kirk Cousins, Michael Penix, the drama of that. But really, you got to wait till Monday Night Football to get a gift from the NFL on December 16th. I don't like that. The Monday night game could have came with Cleveland at home. It could have came with Pittsburgh at home. Could have came with a lot of these games, Kansas City, and they parked it at the end of the year in Week 15.
Yeah, and you and I were talking in the pre-show, JT. Like, I'm with you, right? The Cleveland game feels like it was ripe for a Monday Night Football.
It feels great for Monday night.
It does. You know, we talk about the history in those matchups. We talk about the uniforms, the whole deal. But I think that I agree with you in terms of it feels kind of silly to have to wait that long. But one thing, I think the underrated, I don't even want to say storyline, but the underrated reality of this is as angry as you are, right? As we sit here and you're like, oh man, I can't believe we have to wait. You know who's, I'm sure, loving this as a motivating factor is Antonio Pierce. Because Antonio Pierce, that week, when they finally come home and they're going to have the opportunity to host a Monday Night Football game, you think that's not going to be the message that Antonio has in the locker room? The league made us wait, literally almost until 2025. This is your opportunity, gentlemen, to go play in prime time, to have the entire NFL world watching. And if we're playing the type of football that we hope we're playing, show them what we're about. Right? Show them what we're about. Show them what Raider football in 2024 is about. So I think, yes, certainly disappointing to have to wait that long, but man, AP has got to, you love that as a motivator.
Yep. Then we move on to the Jaguars. I've been going to that area. My in-laws live there. I've gone to Jaguar games over the years. This is their time to come out here. Yeah. For Jaguar fans, they're coming out. This is really Christmas week.
First time at Allegiant, by the way, for the Jags?
Yeah. So the Jags are coming in here. The Jags were 9-8 last year. So we're not talking about a Jaguar team. They really folded down the stretch. They had a lot of problems there within, and if you look at them, they're a good football team. They got good players at all. Trevor Lawrence will come in here. But that game, so you got back-to-back home games. Let's stop for a second. You play Monday night at home, short week. You get the Jaguars at home, but you don't have to travel.
Yeah.
So you're here. That's one of the things I really dissect with this schedule. After what game do you have to travel or not, or can you enjoy being in the building here? So this is the big stretch where the final 3 out of 4 games are at home. They got to matter. They should matter. But they need to matter this year because of the gauntlet, as you talked about, from Week 7 to Week 11. Once we get to Atlanta, Jacksonville, that's going to be really important. And I hope that the Raiders are in the hunt. I expect them to be in the hunt. And I expect that to be a spirited game. That's a really good matchup.
Yeah, and we talked about earlier, right? The kind of benefit on the back end of having so many road games early is you get 3 of 4 at home on the road, right? And you and I, hopefully we have this conversation in late November when the Raiders are playing meaningful football, and we're going to say, God, isn't it great, though, they get to have finished with 3 of 4 at home? So, look, there's certainly the initial sting of starting so much on the road, but if the Raiders are playing good ball, JT, if they have an opportunity to control their own destiny down the stretch, this is when this final month, 15 to 18, we're like, oh, thank goodness we're home.
All right, you thought I was a little upset about that late Monday night game?
A touch.
Upset. Well, here's what I'm waiting for.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy.
I would take a break if we could, but I won't. At New Orleans, they give us December 29th. Okay, Raider Nation, on my radio show, this is the biggest trip everyone wants to go on. So you have something called the Sugar Bowl. You have something called New Year's Eve. You have something called Christmas. And you're telling Raider fans, if you want to go on this game, figure all that out and get to New Orleans. I will be there. I love New Orleans. It's one of my favorite cities for Raider games on top of Mardi Gras and all. It's a big hub for the Raider Nation. So Raider fans, get on this one tonight. This is one I'm telling you got to get on early. This is the night to get the hotel room. Get the airline ticket because everyone in the world is going to want to be in New Orleans for New Year's, bowl season, all of that. So get on this game. Travel agent JT, if you want to be there on this one, you got to get going on that tonight.
And I will say this too, JT. We haven't even mentioned an old friend that we're going to say hello to for the first time down in New Orleans for the first time since he wore silver and black. Again, we talk about games that felt ripe for prime time. Come on.
Yeah, thanks, Eddie, because if you put that game, and it was going to be at New Orleans, it's like, let's move that game with at L.A., the L.A. Rams.
Sure.
Say you put New Orleans in Week 7 and you throw that game at New Orleans on Sunday night or Monday Night Football. I think that's a good matchup.
Great matchup.
Derek Carr versus the Raiders and all that, and Raider fans going there. But that'll be another game where the hype around the Raiders and going back to New Orleans, a history of winning Super Bowl 15 in New Orleans and what that means. It's a great historic city for the Raider Nation, and we'll make that work. So that's coming up Week 17. And then they give the bookend game. Chargers on the road, Chargers at home. That date has not been announced, so that is pending. It could be one or two dates there at the end of the year after New Year's. The Raiders set a franchise record with 63 points against the Chargers. Both franchises want that game to mean something. Remember, at the end of the year,
That's
Denver came to town, and it was looking at, well, what's it going to mean? What's going to mean pride? You don't want to play pride games. You want to play games that you're either already in the playoffs or you need to win the game to get in the playoffs. And who could forget the legendary Justin Herbert game at the end where we knocked him out on the last game of the season. That feels like that again.
Yeah, and look, right, it is kind of a statistical oddity. I'd love to know the last time where we opened, or excuse me, back-to-back years, opened and closed with the same team, right? A year ago it was Denver Week 1 and Week 18. This year, the Chargers Week 1 and Week 18. And the thing that's so interesting to me, JT, regardless of who the opponent is, when you play someone Week 1 and then you play them again in Week 18, they're two separate teams.
Absolutely.
You're not playing the same team that you played Week 1. You are playing two entirely different versions of that team. And it'll be the same case for the Raiders, right? The Raiders that we see Week 1 are going to be very different than the Raiders that we see there in, what would be like early January at that point. So, again, a very unique scheduling kind of quirk, if you will. But look, I would much rather end the season at home with an opportunity like we're all hoping to control your own destiny. And really, as we zoom out a little bit, 3 of 4 at home to finish this thing off, I'm okay with that every day of the week.
Look, you're going to get a division opponent at the end, and then the league wants that, and I get it. You just want to make sure both teams, normally one of the two teams it won't matter for. That's just realistic.
Yeah.
You know, at the end of the year, there's going to be the final game in the division. One team will be out, one team will be in, or one team will be on the verge, and one team's normally out. And you want this game to matter, and hopefully it does matter because I'm optimistic about this Raiders' new roster, the draft picks, what they're doing, what they did with the offensive line, but that's for some other programming down the road. There is the schedule. Eddie, final thoughts for you. Big picture on looking at it. We'll have a lot more reaction coming up on all the Raider platforms.
Yeah, I mean, big picture for me, JT. I think that it's fair. I think it feels like a fair schedule. Obviously, you know, the 2 to start on the road, you don't love that. But again, for me, and I know I sound like a broken record, it's Week 7 and Week 11. That's go time for the Raiders. That's a nice middle of the season kind of push time for the silver and black. And that's what it's going to come down to. And you and I have done this long enough where we're going to look silly in 4 months. We're like, oh, this, and it's all going to change. But for me, it feels fair. It feels reasonable. I love the fact that we have all these home games towards the latter part of the season. But at the end of the day, the 53 guys on that roster, Antonio Pierce got to have them ready to go, regardless of the time, regardless of the location. And this is, we finally have our opportunity to see where they're going to be going in 24.
Yeah, my analysis on the 2024 schedule, Week 1's a monster. Week 1's a monster. Put the pressure on it. It is. It's big for both teams. Got to win that game in L.A. Got to win Week 1 to open up the schedule, get some groove going. That's an important game because at Baltimore, Week 2. I love the fact that the Raiders, travel doesn't bother me.
No.
Normally travel bothers me. Nothing there. I love the bye week where the bye week is at. I don't like starting off with 2 on the road. And then, as I said, a couple of the dates for fans I don't think are conducive for easy travel for the fans. But all over, we know that the home schedule, the road schedule is much more difficult. Yeah. The road schedule's got really some tough teams waiting there. And this team's got to make their name at home. We've had a lot of good games at Allegiant Stadium and a lot of big wins. But the really big wins that need to happen are playoff wins. And the Raiders haven't had that at Allegiant Stadium, making the playoffs once since they came here. So I would say this, and I'll be talking about it on my radio show, Raider Nation Radio, tomorrow, noon to 2 Pacific. Got to get out quick. You got to get to the point with the bye week where it's manageable because, as Eddie said, week 7 to 11 is going to be really tough. The strength of the schedule is back home games that could put you into the playoffs in front of your fans, but those games won't mean anything. They won't mean anything unless you start knocking down wins on this schedule early. So get these wins, get them early, get the Raider fans going, get Antonio Pierce going, get the quarterback in a groove, whoever it is. And I think the Raiders coming out the bye week could look and be optimistic that they can make a run for the postseason.
And JT, I think you bring up a great point where we talk about some of these early games, right? The way that it feels like the schedule lines out, you have to take advantage of the gifts early, right? You have to be able to knock down some of those pins early. You have to put yourself in a position to even be in the race come late November, early December. So it feels like every year it's really important to have that hot start. It's really important to come out of the gates firing. But it feels like it's that times 10 in 2024.
I had a blast with you. Thanks
Great
for
times.
doing this. This is always fun. It's always great to talk to the Raider Nation about the schedule release. Thanks for tuning in from Raiders headquarters, everybody.